and we're studying in the Gospel of John, and we're looking at the death of Lazarus. And of course, that's the sad part, but the happy part is that we're going to see Jesus bringing forth from the grave. Before we start the class, Steve, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
Sure. Divine God, as we look into your word tonight, we pray that our attention will be on you, be on glorifying you, glorifying Jesus Christ, your righteous Son. Thank you for the Spirit. Thank you for the words as they are revealed to us. Help us to look and to know, to understand the Jesus who is the Christ. Through him we pray. Amen.
Amen. Steve, if you would begin reading there in the Gospel of John, chapter 11. And didn't you think we should back up to did you say verse 27? Is that right?
28 is where we'll start.
You want to go ahead and start reading there?
All right. And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." As soon as she heard that, she rose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, "She's going to the tomb to weep there." Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." And some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying?" Previous to this, Jesus had already been met in this place that where as a group, Mary and Martha, Lazarus, and Jesus had met previous times. And it appears that Jesus is trying to stay out of the crowd. He's trying not to attract attention. And so he's in this private location, and Martha comes to him. Well, apparently then he calls for Mary, and Martha goes to get Mary. And he is staying in that place, and which is not in the town, but somehow outside of the town of Bethany. And as soon as Mary jumps up and goes out, the Jews who are weeping there, who are following the ritual of weeping over a death, and they think that she's going to the tomb, so they follow her, and she goes straight to Jesus, and she says a very similar thing, almost word for word, the same as what her sister had said. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She's not really placing blame for Lazarus' death on Jesus. She's just saying, "Jesus, you could have prevented it." And that's as close as they have been with Jesus. They still do not understand. In fact, nobody understands that God's purpose is not to prevent us from dying. He may intervene so that we don't die, but God's purpose is not to prevent dying. But seeing his great power, Mary says, if you had been here with the power that you have, I know you would not have let my brother Lazarus die. And she's probably completely accurate in how she says that. And two times in the text, here and then in verse 38, the text says Jesus groaned. He was in an emotional state. He wanted to be with these close friends of his in a private way, to grieve as anyone would, even though he knew in advance that Lazarus had died. He knew in advance that Lazarus had been in the grave 4 days. But the text says that he groaned within himself. He was human in this way, and then he never responds back to Mary. Mary makes this statement. Jesus does not respond to her. He just says, in a general sense, to her and those that are with her there, "Where have you laid him?" Apparently, Jesus does not know the graveyard, if it is a graveyard. He doesn't know where Lazarus has been laid. And so someone just says, "Well, follow me, come and see." And then Jesus breaks down and is weeping. And some of the Jews say, "See how he loved him," verse 36. But others, verse 37, recognize that a person that can call on heavenly power like Jesus, if he could speak a man born blind, if he could speak that into full sight, full understanding, as had happened back in chapter 9, why would Jesus' friend have died? I mean, they ask a very valid question that demands an answer, and the answer is that God, from the creation, from when Eve sinned and then Adam sinned, has determined that man's not going to be eternal on the earth. He's not going to let his mortal body is not going to live. And so they ask a good question that they need to get an answer to. And so, Rob, I'll stop right there, and you take it away and make some comments.
I think it's kind of amazing that as we get this glimpse into the heart, that the human side of Jesus, how this greatly touched him. And he, of course, verse 35, Jesus wept. He cried about it. But when it talked about him groaning in spirit, he's so deeply troubled. It looks to me like that's a way of expressing how deeply he was troubled. And part of these Jews are not friendly. We're going to see that they're going to run back to Jerusalem, to the ruler of the Jews. They're really not friendly to Jesus at all. And it could be that when he sees Mary with them and he groans in the spirit, that he sees her tenderness and her heartache and everything, and then also he sees these Jews, and he knows many of them are not friendly at all. They're really out to get him. But as he groans within himself, he came to the tomb, and it was a cave, which was common. But I also understand this was also something that generally only the wealthy had. So it gives you some idea that there might have been a little wealth in the family. It was a cave, a stone lay against it. And Jesus said in verse 39, he said, "Take away the stone." And when he said that, did you read down any further than that, Steve, or is that as far as you?
No, I stopped at 37. Go ahead and you read from 38 through 44.
Okay. Jesus, again, groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he'd been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? They took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And when he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth, Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go. So Jesus makes it plain that he speaks out loud, and he says these words of this conversation or prayer with the Father, and so that everybody listening would have the benefit of knowing, because Jesus and the Father, of course, communicated regularly. But it's interesting to me that when it came time to call for Lazarus, he just calls for him to come out. I heard a sermon many years ago that if Jesus hadn't said Lazarus, who knows how many people would have came out. And I get a kick out of that. It's a little humorous, but at the same time, it does even humorous. It presents a great truth. He specified because he had the power to bring as many out as he wanted to. Lazarus, come forth. And when he comes out, it's interesting, the comment made by Martha, well, he's been in there 4 days. Now that's going to smell. And that's what she's saying, that it's going to smell. You let 4 days go by, and you're going to have rot. And
Right.
so
Right.
Jesus has waited long enough. I mean, it's past anything where there might be some question or doubt. I don't know. I've read that some say that that it would happen on occasion that someone might they might pass out and be be passed out for a period of 2 or 3 days, like a coma. But this is, he's been in there for 4 days. She's very concerned about how it's going to smell, and all of that is designed so there can be no doubt that Jesus is indeed raising the dead. That's what that's about. You got a comment about that, Steve?
Well, Rob, this is the last miracle before his own resurrection, Jesus' own resurrection. But this is the last miracle in the book of John. And in my opinion, it's the most stupendous miracle. It's almost foolishness to say that one miracle is more stupendous than another miracle. Just the very fact that it's a miracle, it is enough. But here, Jesus had raised the widow of Nain's son. He had been dead less than 24 hours. The funeral procession is on the way to the cemetery. He wakes him up. Jairus's daughter had been dead minutes, probably less than an hour, when she was raised from the dead. But Jesus intentionally lets Lazarus die, be buried, and be in that tomb long enough to stink, long enough for the body to be decomposing. And certainly Jesus is thinking about himself in coming weeks, from Psalm chapter 16, where heaven says, my Holy One will not see corruption. And here he's going to let Lazarus stay long enough to see corruption, to to no corruption. I have thought for years and wondered for years what Lazarus thought. Here he is in this wonderful, glorious, heavenly place, and he gets this call from Jesus, come on back, come out of the tomb. and after all that Lazarus has been through to get there, nobody, the text never says that Lazarus was really happy about coming out, but he comes out. And I've always thought that was humorous. Please, nobody raised me from the dead when I'm gone. I want to stay where I get to go.
Verse 40,
anyway,
if you look at verse 40, Jesus accomplished what he set out to do. Did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? They're certainly getting to see it, aren't they?
Right. But know what he didn't say there. He does not say, didn't I tell you that if you would believe, you'd see somebody raised from the dead, or you'd see Lazarus raised from the dead? That's not what he says. He says, if you would believe, you're going to see God's glory. And the only way I know how to take that is you're going to see a prelude to something that's going to happen in a few weeks. Only it's going to happen on the third day, not the fourth day, when I'm going to come out of the grave. And wow, can't hardly even talk about it.
Lazarus,
Lazarus,
just the words, Lazarus, come forth. And Jesus is coming again. We have the promise that he is coming again. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life. And of course, they have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. We saw that back in John chapter 5. But this is the resurrection. Lazarus, come forth. There's going to be a day and time when, like Lazarus, we're going to come forth, but not to die again. Lazarus died again. But what, like you say, what a prelude to the resurrection of Jesus. And then Jesus is the first fruits. We're going to be like this. We're going to come forth. Well, I mean, just what a glorious thought. How encouraging is this chapter that this world is not our home. This ailing, sick body we're in. And if you're young enough, you don't understand that, just give yourself a short time and you'll understand it too. That we are going to yearn for something better, and God's going to give it to us.
Along that line, Rob, in 1 Thessalonians Chapter 1, just listen to how Paul describes the resurrection that we're going to have. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. Wow. And here, Jesus is not even, well, I don't know how loud he is, but imagine when you've got the trumpet of God and the voice of the archangel and Jesus himself calling us out of the tomb one day to come.
Awesome. Hey, go ahead and read isn't it verse 45 on down through the end of the chapter, Steve?
All right. Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things Jesus did. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, "What shall we do? For this man works many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation should perish. Now this he did not say on his own authority, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. Then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. Therefore, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there into the country near the wilderness to a city called Ephraim, and there remained with his disciples. But the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Then they sought Jesus and spoke among themselves as they stood in the temple. What do you think? That he will come to the feast? Now both the chief priests and the Pharisees had given a command that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it, that they might seize him. Rob, isn't it something that a miracle as powerful, as incredible as the raising of Lazarus 4 days in the tomb, a well-known man, no way that you could trick people into thinking he had been raised when he had not been raised. You can't trick anybody. And now he comes out of the tomb, and Jesus says, loose him and let him go. Now that's all that the text says about it. As powerful as that is, you've still got a bunch of people standing there who are not going to believe. They know that Jesus has performed a great sign, but they're still wanting to kill him.
Many are called, but few are chosen. This is an example of how hard-hearted men can be. And this is an example of how it really doesn't matter how much proof you have. It doesn't matter how convincing the lesson is, the sermon is. It doesn't matter that in this case you see a wondrous miracle. It doesn't matter, because men's heart are so hard. And the vast majority just don't care. God wants everybody saved, but the majority are just not interested. In this case, wow, Jesus has raised a man from the dead, and even the enemies, even those who would soon be involved, be on the front lines having Jesus killed, they look at verse 47. The chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone's going to believe him. The enemies, they never said, no, he doesn't perform miracles. They said, well, he sure does. We've got to stop him. How hard-hearted and narrow-minded do you have to be to have that attitude? You ever thought about this, Steve, in verse 47? The chief priest and the Pharisees, notice how it's worded, the chief priest and the Pharisees. So who are the chief priests here?
They're Sadducees.
They're Sadducees. And what do the Sadducees believe about resurrection from the dead?
There isn't any such thing.
They don't believe in it at all. And that's going to come into play in just a moment whenever they're ready to kill Lazarus, because they know this man came forth from the grave, and we've given our lives to the teaching that there is no resurrection. So they can see what's happening. They cannot deny the miracle. But wow, Jesus, by raising someone from the dead, has shown his greatness. And they said, wow, there's nothing we can do but kill this man. Just kill him.
Think about that, Rob, for just a minute. This man Lazarus has died, and Jesus has put life back into his mortal flesh, and he walked out of the tomb. In other words, God has raised him from the dead, and you've got 70 men here in a council saying, we're going to kill him again.
Yeah.
That's just almost too incredible. I mean, if it weren't true, it just wouldn't be written that way. But I love the side comments where Caiaphas says, "You don't know anything at all. You don't know that it's expedient that one man should die for the people and not the whole nation perish." And verse 51, John is making a comment about it, a commentary, saying he did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. Well, now that's exactly what Jesus came to do, and that's what he's going to do. And Caiaphas thinks it's on his authority that Jesus is going to die. And all of them are going to get preached to in Acts chapter 2 that it was God's purpose. And now he accuses them of having wicked hands. They wickedly did the deed, but Jesus or God determined that the deed would be done. I just find that fascinating to see both sides of that equation.
Caiaphas, of course, is the high priest, and as he speaks, but he's thinking that he is talking about saving physical Israel.
Right.
And just think of those who have the same type of attitude as Caiaphas, who are looking for something wondrous for physical Israel, when Jesus is dying for the spiritual Israel. It's the spiritual. And God used the mouth of Caiaphas as high priest. He used it to say words of great truth regarding the coming great spiritual kingdom, the Lord's body, the Lord's church. But Caiaphas didn't know that. He probably never accepted that all the days of his life. But he would understand it now, where he's at, where he's waiting now. But indeed, Jesus did die for the people of Israel. But then John adds but he said it goes beyond that, verse 52. But he didn't just die to save Israel; he died to save the world. But not for that nation only, but also that he would gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. He's talking about Christians from all over the world. He died to save anyone and everyone that would come to him. And what a fantastic, exciting passage as far as I'm concerned. I think it's just great.
And, because of this, the text, verse 54, Jesus walks no more openly among the Jews. His days of being visible and having great multitudes around him, they're past now. He has begun to set his face toward Jerusalem and be crucified. And he goes to this little town of Ephraim near the wilderness, verse 54. And he is taking time now with the disciples. And the rest of John until chapter 18, when he is seized, is going to be teaching the disciples various aspects of the kingdom, of the church, of the covenant. And he's but the Passover is getting close, verse 55, and people are starting to go to the Passover, and they need to be purified, and they did that in great big pots of water in baptistries there, and they would spend some time in advance of the Passover being purified. But the topic that they were talking about was Jesus. Is he going to come? Is he not going to come? What do you think? And
this little village, some translations here it says city, village. We know it was small, and that's about it would be very close to where where Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were from. I understand it's about 13 miles from Jerusalem, but it's in a rather isolated It's actually, you can overlook all the cities of the valley from this site, is what I understand. Adam Clark says that at least back in his day, the chronologists generally agreed, and it's probably so, that Jesus was there for probably teaching them the things that you just talked about a moment ago, teaching them for he says that at least 2 months, maybe longer than 2 months. And then I also, verse 56, which you mention briefly, they sought Jesus and they spoke among themselves. Remember how many times Jesus has evaded them? They wanted to catch him, but it wasn't time.
Right.
That now we're going to find it's time. But notice the wording. As the Jews, as they're talking, and some of them are probably favorable to Jesus, some aren't, but it says, well, what do you think, that he will come? And I can't help but think they are underestimating him once again. It's time. It is now time. And you couldn't keep him from coming. He is not afraid of those men. He never was afraid of those men. It's now time to die. It's now time to be that one that was prophesied by Caiaphas, who's going to save the nation and then save the whole world. Do you think he'll come to the feast? Well, sure, he's going to come. He's got a purpose. He is the Passover.
Yes. Yes. But of course, we see that with great clarity of hindsight. And they had seen Jesus or heard of his exploits for a little more than 3 years. And now they're on the warpath. They're going to find him and kill him. It doesn't matter that he can raise others from the dead. They have somehow figured out that if they can kill him, they can keep him dead. But I don't know how they would plan to do that. But that's certainly what they're talking about doing. Verse 57, they've got their spies all over Jerusalem, all over the surrounding areas. Everybody's supposed to keep an eye out for Jesus, and they'll send the Sanhedrin soldiers wherever they have a sighting of Jesus. And so Jesus is, as you said, 13 or 14 miles outside of Jerusalem in a little village called Ephraim, and he's just teaching his disciples there.
Again, what a remarkable, truly remarkable account in the life of Jesus Christ. And like you say, maybe the most outstanding, though I hesitate to say that because he did so many wondrous deeds, but this truly is an amazing miracle that he has performed. And these enemies of his are not interested at all in the truth. They're not interested in accepting someone who they can see has the backing of God. They are so narrow-minded in their focus, and they're thinking only of themselves and themselves alone. It describes a lot of things. It describes our world. To me, it describes the political system today, which I know I don't talk much about that, but there's just a blindness and a narrow-mindedness that causes people to make decisions that are at times just evil. And yet, because of the fact that they have chosen to go down this dark road, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved, therefore God shall send them a strong delusion that they may believe the lie. See, you see that. You can see that. The gospel is so plain. God has made it. It's constant. We're always talking about relevancy. It is so relevant. It is so needed. And there are so many people who could prosper in this life as well as the life to come, but they don't want to see it. And you and I have to be very careful as Christians. Those of us who who have confidence and faith in God, we have to be very careful that we're not so full of ourselves as the obviously the Sadducees were here. That we are blind to simple truths. We just have to watch them.
Yes, yes. Well, we've got about 10 or 11 minutes left. Why don't we discuss the first 11 verses, at least read it and do some of the concluding um, passage that still relates to Lazarus, Mary, and Martha and their interaction with Jesus. And we're going to fast forward here a couple of weeks. And now the text is clear that it's 6 days before the Passover. And I'll read down through verse 11, Rob, and then you make comments. Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served. But Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. Then one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. Then Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always." Then a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests took counsel that they might also put Lazarus to death, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus.
Wow, this just continues this same amazing story. Uh, Jesus came. I got a feeling that Ephraim really wasn't that far away from. It can't really prove that right now, but from Bethany. But Jesus has gone back. He is at Bethany, where he spent considerable time with his friends, Lazarus and Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha. And so he's back at Bethany, and Lazarus, of course, now has been raised. And we see, and I'm going to depart just for a moment. I don't want to take away from this great miracle that's been performed, the life and the teaching and the sacrifice of Jesus. But Martha served. And I've heard through the years from time to time, just remarks like, well, Mary was spiritual and Martha was. I don't see that at all. I see Martha serving in the way she knew how. She was taking care of the meal. And I'll tell you, if we don't have servants, if we don't have people willing to do the physical task, they may not be great Bible teachers. They may not even be great Bible students, but they love God and they serve God the way they know how. That's the way I see Martha. And then as I move on and I talk about Mary, she loves the Lord. I mean, she really does. She took a pound of this very costly ointment, this spikenard. Love just finds a way to help and to serve. Judas himself says in the next two verses that this oil is worth 300 denarii, and scholars say that was the wage. 300 denarii is a year's wage for a common man. So it's very costly. But isn't it amazing how she loved him? She wasn't counting the cost. She wasn't thinking, well, now, so much for me and so much for this. She loved Jesus and she gave everything she had here. wow, what an expression of love. And not only that, but then she anointed his feet with it and she wiped his feet with her hair. Now you just think about that. This is, I've already said that I don't think this is a poor family. But I mean, just think about what it would take in humility and love for a woman to mess her hair up. Steve, think about that. She is wiping his feet with her hair. I mean, that kind of humility and love, it needs to be expressed. Wow. I mean, we're concerned if the wind blows too hard. Well, Steve, you're not too concerned because you don't have that much hair to worry about it. But generally, we're very concerned about the wind messing up. Well, but she loves Jesus. She loves him. She gives so much with that ointment. And then she wipes his feet with her hair. A great, great act of humility and servitude. It's just amazing what she has just given for the Lord. She truly loved Jesus. Steve?
I'm reminded of an aunt that I had who wore her hair up. She never cut her hair until just before she died. And then the doctor kind of forced it. But she would let that bun down, and we would see that hair go way past her back, way on, kind of even down her legs, long hair. And I see that kind of hair that Mary has, that she's not trying to keep it short. She has it long, and she's using it for great purpose right now. She's using it as a towel. And like you say, it was amazing to Jesus. And Jesus had to have been irked when he saw or heard what Judas Iscariot says. And so he just mildly rebukes Judas. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. She's done a great work for me. She has done this for my burial. I don't think she knew she was doing it for Jesus' burial, but Jesus knew it. She was anointing him ahead of time for his burial. And then he makes this universal statement: the poor you have with you always, but you do not have me always. And wow, he's saying something there that I don't know that anybody in hearing to his voice understands that. Now they're going to understand it in a couple of weeks. They're going to know, because he will have been killed then and raised from the dead, and they're beginning to understand the purpose of God and the work of God and the power of God and the eternity of God and the gospel. But here they just know she loves Jesus, and she knows she loves Jesus, and Jesus gets it.
On the other hand, Judas, he's just a thief. He's concerned about the money. He's the one that carried the money bag. But she could, even if she had known what Judas was, or had known people with the attitude of a Judas, she wouldn't care, because she loved Jesus. And she just, he's a thief, and she's a person who loves. Wow. She cared, she loved, she served, she gave. I know you do, and I know, and I've been privileged to know some folks like that in my life. And they make a difference. They make a difference to me. That
Yes.
kind of an attitude is just, it's just shows. And Steve, I don't know about your experiences, but I think you've got about 3 times as many women as men who have that attitude. The greatest servants on earth are too few, but I am grateful. I am grateful that we have women in the kingdom, because there's far more of them that have this kind of a spirit and attitude than there are men.
Well, somebody like me would have looked at this oil of spikenard and we'd have started running dollar signs in our head, trying to figure out, now, what is this really worth? She never does that.
That's
She
right.
knows this is something great that she can give Jesus, and she's going to give it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, you're not going to stop her.
not going to stop her. I
Uh,
like what's said in verse 9 here also, that a great many of the Jews know that Jesus is there. I mean, Jesus has been walking from the little town of Ephraim back to Bethany, and you just see the children. They see Jesus and they take off running. They tell somebody, and they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else, and pretty soon, he shows up in the house, and there are 20 people invited, and outside there's 3,000 or 4,000.
and they come to see Lazarus too.
They came to see Lazarus. How many times do you hear that people not only, I mean, they want to see Jesus, but they can't wait to see Lazarus? This man who was in the grave, laying for 4 days and putrefying, and now he's just as alive as they are and sitting there eating. What do you say? Every time Lazarus takes a step, he is saying to the world, Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is from God. And all of these naysayers, all they're saying is, or what they're proving is, you don't know what you're doing. You don't even know the God that you're serving. You're just completely lost in this. Every time Lazarus does anything now, it creates a stir. And so the chief priests say, we need to kill him too. Now, to me, that's just incredible. They're going to try to kill the one that God just raised.
Yeah, here he is. He's been raised from the dead. And I mentioned these chief priests are Sadducees. And
Right.
not only do they not like the fact that Jesus is getting the attention, but of all things, look at what he has done. He has raised somebody from the dead, and we have all of our lives said that that's not possible, that doesn't happen. But it was happening. And so they said, well, here's what we have to do. We not only have to kill Jesus, but now, we're not worried about Rome coming in because of Lazarus. It's not because we're going to save our nation. It's going to save ourselves. We're going to kill Lazarus because he was raised. And our time is our
I love this story.
yeah.
In chapter 11, Rob, just to close, I don't know of another time when Jesus got emotional like he did around his friends, Mary and Martha. And I've been to funerals before where I didn't really even know the individual that I'm honoring. I'm generally there to honor somebody in his family, his or her family. But sometimes it just gets so emotional, with everybody crying or things that maybe a preacher has to say, that I get emotional too. And of course, anybody at Fultondale knows I'm emotional all the time anyway. But Jesus was not that way. But when his friend had died, he was emotional.
Uh,
Powerful story.